At this time, the government calls Chennie Smith.
Please state and spell your name for the record. Chennie Smith. ChennieSmith. Chennie Smith, having been first duly sworn, testifies as follows to wit.
Good morning, Miss Smith.
Good morning.
You and I met before. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Actually, not even that long ago. Just about a week or so ago.
Yes, sir.
Before that time, had we ever met or spoke?
No, sir.
You're currently incarcerated. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
What are you incarcerated for?
A probation violation.
Is that here in Orleans Parish?
Yes, sir.
Before that probation violation, did you have any other adult felony criminal convictions within the last 10 years?
No, sir.
How old are you?
I'm 26.
Where did you grow up?
Where?
Where did you grow up? What part of the city?
New Orleans.
Any particular neighborhood? Any part of the city?
Uptown.
I'm going to turn your attention to April of 2012. Did you have a brother at that time?
Yes, sir.
What was his name?
Chennie Smith.
Did Vinny have a nickname?
Funk.
How old was Vinny in April of 2012?
He was 27 or 28.
A little bit older than you then?
Yes, sir. Not that far.
What was Vinny's physical condition like at that time?
He was paralyzed.
From how far down his body?
His waist on down.
What had happened to Vinny? How did he become paralyzed?
He had got shot up.
Now, I'm going to turn your attention to a specific date in April. April 22nd, 2012. Do you remember that date?
April 22nd or April 23rd?
What do you remember about April 23rd? Is that important to you?
That's the date, I think.
The date of what?
He got killed.
Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
Were you a witness to his being killed?
No, sir.
Were you anywhere around when it occurred?
Not exactly where he got killed, no.
How did your brother die?
He had got shot.
Was he alone or with someone else? Was he alone?
No, sir.
Who was he with?
His girlfriend.
Do you remember her name?
Chelsea.
Did you know her very well at the time?
Yes, sir.
And where was he shot? Or what was he doing when he was shot? Do you know?
What you mean, what he was doing when he got shot?
Was he on the streets or was he in his home? Do you know?
In a vehicle.
Was Miss Lewis with him?
Yes, sir.
Now, I asked you earlier if you were anywhere near where the shooting occurred, and you said not exactly. Where were you? Do you remember at the time that he was shot? Do you know where you were?
I think he was like up on Martin Luther King, and I was like the opposite.
About how far away do you know, in terms of miles or anything?
I mean, not too far.
So, did you hear any gunshots or anything that drew your attention to something that might have been happening?
No, sir.
So, how did you hear about Vinny being shot that day?
I had got a phone call.
How long after the shooting did you get that phone call? Do you remember?
Like 10 or 20 minutes or something like that.
What did you do after learning of your brother being shot?
Went to my vehicle and got in a car and went to university.
That's where he was being treated?
Yes, sir.
Did you ever talk to your brother again?
No, sir.
Was he conscious when you arrived? Was he awake?
No, sir.
And when did he die?
He was already dead.
He was already dead. At the time that your brother was killed, and again, this is April 23rd, 22nd or 23rd, is that fair? 2012? Were you dating anyone? Were you in a relationship with someone?
Yeah, I was dating someone.
Who was that?
Ivory Dorsey.
What was that name again?
Ivory Dorsey.
At the time that your brother was killed?
Yes, sir.
Did you know Lionel Allen?
Yes, sir.
At the time that your brother was killed?
Yes, sir.
Did he have a nickname?
Yes, sir.
What was that?
Lonnie B.
Were you with Lionel Allen at any point in the day before your brother was killed? Do you remember that?
I was not actually with him. We wasn't together, but
did you see him?
I seen him walk like...
Before your brother was killed or after?
I seen him before.
Do you know what time of the day you saw him?
It was like in the evening.
Did you ever hear Mr. Allen tell anyone that he was with you at the time that your brother was killed?
No, sir.
Now, did you speak to the NOPD, the New Orleans Police Department, after your brother was killed?
A detective? Maybe so.
You do remember talking to a detective?
Yes, sir.
Now, let me ask you a little bit more about Lionel Allen. Did you know if Lionel Allen, at the time that your brother was killed in April of 2012, was he in a gang?
Yes, sir.
What was the name of that gang?
YMM.
What did YMM stand for?
Young Melph Mafia.
How do you know that?
That's the neighborhood I grew up in.
Had you ever heard of another group called the Gualas?
Yes, sir.
And what are the Gualas?
They were just some girls from around, I guess, in that neighborhood too.
Did you consider yourself to be a Guala?
Yes, sir. At the time.
Do you know Passion Cobbins?
Yes, sir.
Was she a Guala?
Yes, sir.
What was the relationship, or was there a relationship? Let me ask it that way. Was there a relationship of any kind between the Gualas and the Young Melph Mafia?
We knew them, like, you know.
And getting back to the Young Melph Mafia, let's see if you can identify some of the people that were in this group, this gang. Do you know Brian Scott?
Yes, sir.
Was he in that gang?
Yes, sir.
Do you know Juwan Forsha?
Yes, sir.
Was he in that gang?
Yes, sir.
Do you know Dedrick Keelan?
Yes, sir.
Was he in that gang?
Yes, sir.
Do you know DeAndre Hills?
Yes, sir.
Was he in that gang?
Yes, sir.
Do you know Delwyn McLaren?
Yes, sir.
Was he in that gang?
Yes, sir.
Do you know Derek Carter?
Yes, sir.
Was he in that gang?
Yes, sir.
Do you know Sean Grayson?
Yes, sir.
Was he in the gang?
Yes, sir.
And finally, do you know Jacoby Boyd?
Yes, sir.
Was he in the gang?
Yes, sir.
Now, let's talk a little bit about your knowledge of the Young Melph Mafia. To your knowledge, when did this group form? When did you, if you know, when did they get together?
Maybe like in 2007, 2008, something like that.
Did they make up the name themselves, or was there somebody else using the name?
Somebody else had the name.
Somebody else had the name?
Yes, sir.
What happened to the people that had the name from before?
They was killed.
So, who started to take the name? The people that we just named?
Pretty much. Yes, sir.
So you lived around these people that we just talked about, right?
I mean, I grew up from like when we was in the projects.
Now, in the times that you were around members of the Young Melph Mafia, did you ever see any of them sell drugs in your presence?
No, sir.
Did you ever see any of them carry a firearm in your presence?
No, sir.
Now, you said that you know Ivory Dorsey. Is that right? Or Ivory?
Yes, sir.
Was he in the Young Melph Mafia?
He was with them.
He was with them?
The majority of the time.
Was there any relationship between Ivory and the Young Melph Mafia in terms of giving them things back and forth to each other?
Yes, sir.
What was that?
I think it was handguns.
Who supplied the guns to whom?
I resupplied the guns to them.
And you actually saw this?
I mean, I didn't see it intentionally.
You heard them talk about it?
Yes, sir.
Now, was your brother, Vinny, was he a member of the Young Melph Mafia?
No, sir.
What was his relationship with the members of the Young Melph Mafia? What was that like?
I mean, like I said, we all grew up in the same neighborhood.
I mean, were they enemies or did they like each other? Tell us about that.
They was not enemies.
But did Vinny know members of the Young Melph Mafia?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask you some questions about what we've been referring to as Overt Act number 16 for a point of reference. In June of 2012, do you remember being in a bar when a shooting occurred?
Yes, sir.
Do you know a person named Deshaun Hartford?
I mean, I don't know him personally.
What do you know about Deshaun Hartford?
I don't know him personally, but I mean, I was in that bar.
Right. Was he the person that was shot that day?
Yes, sir.
So where is this bar located?
On 2nd and Dry Aids.
Do you remember what time you got there?
Not the exact time.
Was it daytime or nighttime?
It was at night.
Do you remember how late into the evening when you got there?
Not the exact minute. Maybe like 9 or 10.
Were you alone or with anyone?
I was with someone.
With whom? I'm sorry.
I was with someone.
Who was that?
My 2 friends.
Were you there with Passion Cobbins?
Yes, sir.
So, was there a particular event going on that night? Was it a party or celebrating anything? What do you remember?
Like one of them days, like a drink special night or something.
Now, do you know who Burnell Allen is?
Yes, sir.
Does he have a nickname?
Yes, sir.
What is that?
Baldy.
Do you know if Burnell Allen was there that night?
Yes, sir.
What is his relationship, if any, to Lionel Allen? Do you know?
His uncle, if I'm not mistaken. Or cousin, if I'm not mistaken.
They are related?
Yes, sir.
Do you know if Lionel Allen was at 2nd and Dry Aids in or around this bar before the shooting occurred? Did you see him?
Yes, sir.
Tell us what happened. What do you remember?
I mean, I wasn't out there when they were shooting. I was inside the bar.
Okay. What happened?
I just heard gunshots. The only thing is, I was going to try and duck down.
So, to be fair, you didn't see who shot anyone. Is that right?
No.
You were inside?
Yes, sir.
What did you do after you heard shots?
Like ducking down at the wall.
Did you ever go outside to see what was going on?
Afterwards.
What did you see?
People just hollering and screaming.
Just kind of chaos?
Yes, sir.
Is that when you saw Mr. Hartford, Deshaun Hartford? Did you see him? Man, it's okay. If you don't remember, that's fine.
I didn't really see his body, but
you found out at some point he was a victim.
That was that person.
Do you know if anybody else was shot?
No, sir.
Did you ever talk to the police about this incident?
No, sir.
Now, I mentioned that you and I just met for the first time just a couple of weeks ago. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
In that meeting, did we suggest anything that you are telling us today? Did we tell you what to say, ma'am?
No, sir.
I have nothing further. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Cross?
Yes, Judge.
Mr. Fleming.
Miss Smith, I have just a few questions for you.
You mentioned, I believe on direct, that you had grown up in the Melphamine projects?
Yes, sir.
And your brother, Vinnie Smith, did as well, right?
Yes, sir.
And regarding the incident in which your brother was killed, well, let me back up. Mr. Rivera asked you a few times if you'd met with him for the first time a couple of weeks ago, along with the agent that was there. That was on May 30th of this year, right?
May 30th?
May 30th.
May 30th.
A couple weeks ago?
Yes.
When you met with them, you discussed the incident in which your brother Vinny was killed, right?
Yes, sir.
And you discussed with them what information you had and what information you may have learned, right?
Yes, sir.
And you had told them that you spoke with Passion Cobbins about what happened, right?
Yes, sir.
You relayed to them the information that Passion had given you.
I mean, some of it, yeah.
Okay. And you relayed to them that Passion had gotten the information from someone else?
Yeah. The person I told her is sitting in the audience.
Okay. Now, I believe you said on direct that after learning that your brother was killed, you went to the hospital?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you go immediately to the hospital?
I got in my car and I went to the hospital, sir.
Okay. Did you go to the scene where your brother's car was at Tulane and Broad?
No, sir, because by the time he was already at University Hospital.
Okay. You did not go to the scene at Tulane and Broad where your brother's car was?
No, I went to University Hospital, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have no further questions at this time. All right. Mr. Ludwig? I have just a few questions, ma'am. I just want to follow up on something Mr. Fleming just asked you. You said that you didn't go to the scene of your brother's car. You went directly to the hospital?
Yeah. By that time, he was already at University Hospital.
Did you go with anyone to the hospital? Did anybody go with you?
Yes, sir.
Who went with you?
My friends.
What were their names?
Passion Cobbins.
She went to the hospital with you?
And Teacher Nika Newman. Yes, sir.
I believe Mr. Rivera also mentioned, I think it was June 3rd when Mr. Hartford was killed. Do you recall talking about that on direct?
Yes, sir.
You remember talking about that night? I think you said you were in a bar.
Yes, sir.
And you went to that bar with Ms. Cobbins, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you were inside when this happened, correct?
In the bar, yes, during the shooting.
And you were inside the bar with Ms. Cobbins when the shooting happened, correct?
Yes, sir.
And so you couldn't see what happened outside, correct? You don't know what happened outside.
No, sir.
And I think you also... Let me back up. I'm sorry. The evening that your brother was killed, I think you and Mr. Rivera talked about that you saw Mr. Allen that evening. Do you remember talking about that you saw Mr. Allen that evening?
Yes, sir. I seen him. Yes, sir.
Was that at the DJ party?
Uh-huh.
Okay. You saw Mr. Allen at the DJ party that night? Your answer is yes?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
I guess you also, Mr. Rivera, you also talked about a gentleman named Ivory and that you all were dating.
Yes, sir.
How long did you all date for? Do you recall?
Not that long. Probably a month and a half, something like that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Ludwig. Ms. Schilling.
I just have a couple of questions. Hello, Ms. Smith. You were just asked some questions about the night of the shooting at the bar at 2nd and Dryades. Do you recall that? Yes, ma'am. And just to be clear then, you and Miss Cobbins were inside at the back of the bar when that shooting occurred, right? Yes, ma'am. And so you and Miss Cobbins did not see what happened with the shooting outside, correct? We didn't see it with our eyes, no. Thank you very much. No further questions.
Thank you, Miss Schilling. Mr. McKenna. Good morning.
Good morning.
You were asked on direct about a group of girls that call themselves Guala, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you said that you knew about Guala, correct?
Yes, sir.
And they were just a group of girls that just hung out. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
You also talked about knowing various defendants that are seated over here and the group Young Melph Mafia, correct?
Yes, sir.
You've known these gentlemen since 2007 or 2008, correct?
No. What I was asked was your group started he asked me what year, that the group started, but I've been knowing them since we was coming up.
Okay. So you knew them as a group of guys just hanging out, correct?
A gang, pretty much. Yeah.
Excuse me?
A gang.
A gang. Okay. And not just as a group of guys who knew each other socially, correct?
I knew them.
Thank you. No further questions.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. McKenna. Mr. Lawrence. How you doing, Miss Smith?
Good morning, sir.
So, you have known Mr. McLaren for how long?
Who is Mr. McLaren?
Delwyn McLaren.
I mean, since we was coming up.
So you met him when you were a very young child?
Not young, but we went to elementary school.
Okay.
In middle school.
Middle school. Do you know what happened to Mr. McLaren's mother?
Mr. McLaren's mother?
Delwyn McLaren's mother. A yes or no is fine.
No, sir.
Do you know what happened to his father?
No, sir.
Do you know who raised him? Do you know who raised him?
I don't remember her name, but I do know her. I don't know the name.
You don't know her name, but to your knowledge, that was not his mother, was it? Or do you know?
Whose mother, sir?
Delwyn McLaren's mother. All of my questions are concerning Delwyn McLaren.
Okay. Only Delwyn McLaren?
Right. Did you know who his mother was?
I don't remember her name, sir.
Okay. Are you aware that he was working at Voodoo Barbecue in 2010?
Yes, sir.
You are aware of that?
I think so.
Okay. And you are aware that Mr. McLaren has a child?
Yes, sir.
About a 3.5-year-old son?
Yes, sir.
Who was born shortly before he was arrested. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you know who is raising his child currently, right now? Any idea? Your Honor, I'm going to object to relevance at this point. I think we've established the point that he has a family. Yes, It's more than that, Judge. It will be tied in later with cross-examination of another witness. I'm going to let her answer this one, but we'll have to discuss it if we are going to go further because I frankly don't see the relevance. Do you know Dwight Anderson?
Dwight Anderson?
Dwight Anderson, yes.
No, sir.
Never heard of him?
No, sir.
Are you aware that at the time Mr. McLaren was arrested, he was working with an organization called Stop the Violence?
Yes, sir.
You are aware of that? And he was giving talks to young children about stopping the violence in the neighborhood? Are you aware of that?
Yes, sir. Ceasefire.
Ceasefire, that's the group.
Yes, sir.
You are aware of the group called Ceasefire?
Yes, sir.
And you knew that Delwyn McLaren was working with that group at the time he was arrested?
Yes, sir.
And that he had a young son at the time he was arrested?
Yes, sir.
The area that you grew up in is very dangerous, isn't it?
Sorta.
Would you say that?
Yes.
And wouldn't you say it's reasonable for a person to carry a gun when... Wait, I'm not so sure she answered. She looked like she was about to answer or say something further when you... Did you complete your answer to his question?
Yes. Yes, I did.
So, it would be reasonable for someone to carry a gun for protection who was not a drug dealer.
Say the question again, sir.
Given the dangerous neighborhood you grew up in and that we're talking about, wouldn't it be reasonable for someone who is not a drug dealer to carry a gun for protection? Because you could get robbed, correct?
Yes, sir.
Was that a yes?
Yes, sir.
I'm just about done, Judge. And just to reiterate, you never saw Delwyn McLaren carry a gun or deal drugs. That was your testimony earlier, wasn't it?
You're asking me that?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That's all the questions. Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Redirect? Just a couple. Miss Smith, You just heard the question that was asked about people carrying guns in your neighborhood for protection from robbery. Did you hear that question?
Yes.
To your knowledge, do you know if the members of the Young Melph Mafia that you identified earlier, did they carry guns to protect themselves from robbery?
Yes, sir.
Robbery from whom? Who was trying to rob them?
People, I guess.
Other gangs?
I guess. Yes, sir.
That's all I have. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
I can step down now?
Yes, please.